part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for stopping by to the latest episode of Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol.
Thanks for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it already. We've got a great guest here with us. If you're from the Cleveland area or just watch Cavs games for that matter, you know him very well. He's a former first-round draft pick of the Cavaliers in 1974, 9-year NBA vet, 7 years with the Cavs, was an all-star in the wine and gold in 1979. Averaged 16 points per game. He's also the Cavs director of alumni relations. And like I said, you see him on the broadcast. Scott, we've been watching him do it for quite some time now on Bally Sports as a team studio analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Our guest is former Cavalier, Campy Russell. Campy, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's a great time of year to talk a little Cavs basketball and talk about the expectations and just talk a little basketball.
So let's reflect back on your 7 years with the Cavs. You know, looking back, for a lot of our younger listeners here, you know, the 1970s and 80s, it seems like, you know, it's such a distant memory or not a memory for them at all. But give us one of your favorite memories going back to those years with the Cavs in the early days.
I think one of my favorite memories regarding the guy, it's more about the guys that I played with. It was about the relationship that we all have from day one through this day. I think that is the joy that I think about when I think about the 70s, when back in those days with my teammates, whether you're talking about Jim Brewer, Footsie Walker, Jim Jones, and by the way, Jim Jones and Footsie Walker and I both came to the Cavaliers the same year. I was the number 1 draft choice. Footsie Walker was the number 2 draft choice. And then we picked up Jim Jones, who was in the ABA at that particular time. And he joined the Cavaliers. And then as we all know, we had Austin, who was the number 1 draft choice 2 or 3 years before that. Jim Brewer, who was 2 or 3 years prior to that. So what we had was a group of Midwest players who Bill Fitch believed in because he was he coached at the University of Minnesota some years ago. So when I reflect back, I reflect back on those times of coming together with a lot of guys that had the same thoughts and that was trying to be successful. Think about the relationship that we had then and the relationships that we have even to this day. And for me, that is the beauty of, and that's what I think a lot about when I think of Cavalier basketball and where it was back in 74, which was, for me, that was a franchise that was only 4 years old. And to be a part of that franchise and to take that franchise and help propel it to where it is today, I think that's definitely a great opportunity that we all had.
What do you remember most of the Richfield Coliseum? I mean, the early 70s, that was a state-of-the-art facility. You know, I remember going there as a kid. It was out in the middle of nowhere, but that was the mecca of basketball here for Northeast Ohio back in the 70s, 80s, early 90s. What do you remember about the old Coliseum?
Well, I remember that it was just a spectacular building. And what I mean by that, it was just, as you just mentioned, it was out, as we used to call it, out on the prairie. Because it was just out there. There was nothing around it other than trees and a lot of space. But what I really take out of that is the fact that everybody in this Northeast area came to that one spot because they embraced that team that we had, which was a young basketball team. And the fact that Coliseum was the baby of Nick Milletti, who won it and did whatever was necessary to get that building put out there in Richfield. And there is no question in my mind that was one of the most spectacular buildings in the league. You know, it was held 22,000 fans just about. And it was just a great venue. Yes, it was out in the middle of nowhere, but our fans, whether they was coming from Youngstown, whether they was coming from Columbus, whether they was coming from Akron, whether they was coming from Sandusky, whether they were coming from the city of Cleveland, they all gathered at that place to witness a bunch of young guys, a young team that wanted to fight and to put themselves on the national level of some of the other teams that were around, who had been around for a lot of years. So the Coliseum was a beautiful facility. It brought together a bunch of young guys who really wanted to make. That's what I remember about the Coliseum, and the fact that I went to the Muhammad Ali, Chuck Wepner's fight out there. I used to go watch the Earth, Wind, and Fire there. I mean, it was a great venue to go to, but it was also tough to get in there, and it was also tough to get out of there. But we relished the fact that everybody showed up.
Yeah, you look at all the highlights, and even as a kid going there, Campy, it was rare that you'd ever see an empty seat in that building. And it's just a shame that they couldn't preserve it before they tore it down. You know, it was only up there for only around 20 years, and then they tore it down. It's just a shame that the communities couldn't come together and preserve it.
Well, it's like anything else, you know, there's always decisions that have to be made. And I think if you look back at it now, it probably was the best thing that happened. That one, it was there, and then it was taken away. But what came about is what we're looking where I'm sitting at right now.
Yeah,
you know,
right
here in the Rocket Mortgage Field House, in a grand facility downtown Cleveland. And as we all know, back in the early 70s, 80s, it was not a good site. Downtown Cleveland, there was not very much down here, but now you look around some years later, this town has grown so much to the degree that we have people living downtown in high-rise apartments, and restaurants are now down here, and this is now a destination. And I think that's the beauty of what we had out in Richfield now, in terms of what we have now downtown Cleveland. And this town now is flourishing because of that.
When you go back to 1980, Cavs traded you to the Knicks just before your 7th year with the Cavs, or right before your 8th year or 7th year, because you came back later on.
Yes.
When they traded you, did that catch you by surprise? And did you ever get a reason why?
I don't think it caught me by surprise, because I think this team was kind of in a situation where they were trying to grow, but at the same time, they was trying to create some stability. And I remember talking to, I'm trying to think who was the general manager at the time. I'm going to say Don Delaney, I believe, or what was one. There was so much going on at that time. But at any rate, yes, I was traded, and I went to the Knicks, and to me, I think it turned out good for everybody. It allowed a young guy like Mike Mitchell to become a much better basketball player, and he did a good job of growing his own game and putting himself in position to be a star in the league. But as it relates to my situation, I think it just came down to they wanted to move Fritz Walker, and at the time, Fritz Walker and I, and even to this day, had a great relationship. And, we both thought that Mike Mitchell could play the small forward position. I felt like I could move over and play the big guard along with Fritz Walker. And I had asked the ownership at that time, I said, hey, I'm willing to move over and let Mike play the small forward. I can move over and play the 2. Fritz Walker can play can play the point guard, which he and I had just such great synergy between us. I thought it made sense, but obviously they did not. And so they ended up trading me to the New York Knicks, which I think was a really good opportunity for me to have the opportunity to play with the New York Knicks and to be a part of the history of the New York Knicks.
I mean, you eventually made it back to Cleveland in a trade 4 years later. Now, you suffered a knee injury in a pickup game in Cleveland. Is that right?
No, it was in my hometown in Pontiac.
Oh, Pontiac. Okay. I got you. And then you came back, and you came back to Cleveland. That was your final, your final season in the NBA. How difficult was that with that injury? I mean, wasn't something during a real game. It was, like you said, up in your hometown. Recovering from that, do you remember what was going through your mind?
Well, to me, I had seen a lot of different examples of guys who had that same injury, which was an anterior cruciate at that particular time. Who struggled to try to come back too soon. And because of those examples, I believe it was the best thing happened to me because I saw what not to do. And that was to try to rush back and, put yourself in the bad position where you never would have stability in your leg anymore. So basically what I did, I just took more time to make sure that my leg had healed, my knee had healed, and that I had a great surgeon in New York who did an outstanding job. And to this day, I can say that I did what I thought I needed to do, which was to take the time. And yes, I was able to come back. I felt like I was healthy at that time, and my legs and knees were strong. And it just happened that things did not go the way I wanted it to go. But from a longevity standpoint, the best thing happened to me was that injury, as well as me surviving it, as well as me having the great mobility that I still have in it to this day. So in my mind, I think it all worked out. I did the right thing, and it all has worked out.
What fascinates me about your career and the time you spent in the league, Campy, is that the NBA, they debuted the 3-point line in the 79-80 season, which was right in the time of your era.
Yeah.
How was it like adapting to that? Because I know that first year, I looked up your stats. Do you remember what you shot from beyond the arc that first year?
I have no idea.
In 41 games, you went 1 for 9 beyond the 3-point line.
Right. Well, and that makes sense because for me and the way the game was played at that time, the game was played more, not so the 3-point shot back in those times was basically when you were down a lot of points. Mm-hmm. And now you were trying to get back in the game by taking 3-pointers. Okay. And, so for me, I was not a 3-point shooting kind of guy. For me, my game was more about scoring the ball, getting other people engaged into the game, rebounding the ball, trying to play an overall game is what my game was about. It was not necessarily about the 3-point shooting. It was about how do we keep everybody engaged into the game where everybody can have some semblance of success. And more importantly, the team could have success.
What was your initial reaction? I don't know how many years it's been now to the NBA kind of going to the 3-point, shot being it's a common occurrence. I mean, the NBA has completely shifted in the last, say 10 years, 10, 12 years, maybe a little longer. What was your initial reaction seeing the NBA game changing like that?
Well, I think the thing that we all understand in life, and that is changes. Things will change. Things are going to change no matter whether you are with them or not. But in terms of the 3-point shooting in today's game, it is something that has definitely added value to the overall league in terms of the excitement that it has created because these guys are such, I'm going to say, great shooters because that is what the game is more about now, where it's a lot of dribble penetrating, kicking the ball to wide open 3-point shooters. And there's a lot of great 3-point shooters in this league. So for me, I think it's been a really good, valuable tool for the league because it has created more attraction. The younger fans love to see that now. But so for me, I think it was a necessary part of the game that needed to happen to assist the league in continuing to grow and to be a worldwide game.
Who is your favorite player playing with or against when you look back?
With, wow. I mean, there's so many guys that you have played with that, for me, it's always been about relationships. It hadn't been so much about the playing. But I would say one of the top guys for me is Foots Walker. And the reason why I say that is, again, it's just because of the relationship that we have, the synergy that we had when we played together. We could almost read each other's mind without even saying a word, you know. And so definitely Foots goes down as one of those guys. I would say Nate Thurman would be the other, a guy that, you know, I always had a lot of respect for and grew up watching him. And then having the opportunity to play on the same floor with him was a whole different level for me. And then the other piece of it with Nate Thurman, it had to do with just the relationship, again, that we had, you know, with each other and how we dealt with each other. And he was a big part of a guy who really kind of helped me take another level in my own game as well. So Nate Thurman definitely is one of those guys. And then, you know, obviously the guys I came in with, Jim Brewer, Austin, playing with Austin, having the opportunity to play with Bingo Smith, you know, those guys have and will always hold a lot of respect and love because of all of our relationships.
Got one question before we get to current Cavs players. Your last season, it was into the early 80s. You know, the league was transitioning. You had Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. The Cavs are also transitioning. You know, you had, I think in that last season, was World Be Free on that team? I think so. In your last year with the Cavs?
No.
Okay.
No.
And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say in the last year, in the early 80s, that last year, could you see the Cavs transitioning? Could you see where they were going to be, you know, 2, 3, 4 years down the road into the 80s team that we all remember? I know we were several years away from that, but could you kind of see that the seeds being planted at that point?
In the early 80s, for me, when I look back at it in 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, the team was still kind of teetering. I think there was, you know, the stability that this team and the city and everybody needed was not there. And I think that stability came along when the Guns took over the team. And when the Guns took over the team, a lot of great things happened, but I think they made some great choices for the general manager in terms of a guy like Wayne Emery, for a coach like Lenny Wilkins.
Mm-hmm.
And then those guys, along with the ownership, put together a plan that helped save basketball, in my opinion, here in the Cleveland area, and putting together a game plan that has put us where we are to this day. You know, so when you look back at that time, you know, it was another one of those things that things change, and it changed for the better because of Mr. Gunn and his forethoughts and his ability to bring the right chemistry together to make those 80s teams, mid 80s and going forwards teams, mm-hmm. some of the best teams in the history of Cavalier basketball.
All right, if you're looking for a perfect holiday gift for this holiday season, look no further than the Columbus-based company Homage. We've teamed up with them here on the podcast to bring you some great products. They were nice enough, Scott, to send us some shirts.
Yeah, and I love the shirt I got. It's a Cleveland Guardians, and it's really cool. I mean, it fits well. You know, some of the shirts, you always find a shirt that, you know, maybe just doesn't fit right. These fit perfect. And they allow you to breathe too, because I'm a guy who gets kind of hot, and these are the shirts that you want to wear, especially when you're working, say, in the office in the middle of the winter time when it might get a little warm. Somebody turns about the thermostat, or if you want to wear outside on a nice day like today when it's 50 degrees. Just perfect shirt, nice and comfortable.
Yeah, high quality shirts. I've had some Ohio State shirts. They sent me a Cavs one that's really cool.
Yep.
The old Cavs, a gold font from the 70s style on there. They've got NBA, MLB, college, NFL, a lot of cool, comic book style shirts, hand-drawn designs, great quality from our friends over at Homage. So if you're looking for a holiday gift, go ahead to homage.com. Go in our show notes here, wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether it's on Spotify or Apple. Click the episode here and then use that link in the show notes that we're providing you to go ahead and purchase your latest Homage gear. They just not only just have the shirts, but they've got cool sweatpants, sweatshirts, really, really cool stuff as well. One of my favorites ones, Scott, you always comment on it when I wear it, is that Cavs NBA Jam shirt that has the, stats of Mark Price and Brad Daugherty.
Love that. I remember that. We used to play NBA Jam all the time in the basement. So this brings back a lot of good memories, a lot of good retro stuff too. Love it.
Yeah, they've expanded that now to the NFL Jam and MLB Jam too. So a lot of cool stuff there with our friends from Homage, based out in Columbus. Purchase them at homage.com, but go on our show notes and click that link there to get your latest and greatest Homage merchandise that will provide a perfect holiday gift this holiday season.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Campy, let's talk current Cavs. Big news right now surrounding this team. The injuries to Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Darius out at least a month. Evan, 6 to 8 weeks. We've already seen them play, I think, 2 games so far since then, and coming up with some wins. How can they recover in the short term in the next 2 months or so without trying to fall down to the standings and get out of playoff contention?
Well, one, no one knows really what's going to occur, but I think this is just an opportunity for some other guys to show that they can assist in impacting this basketball team, the current basketball team. When you look at Mobley and you look at Darius Garland, they mean a lot to this Cavalier basketball team because of their great versatility. In terms of Evan does so much out there on the floor. Just his presence with this Cavalier team creates great success for him because of his ability to rebound the ball, block shots, run the floor. And he's just one of those guys, as I always say, he's a winner. He's a guy that can impact your team and put your team in a position to win basketball games. As it relates to Darius, Darius is valuable to this basketball team because of his ability to keep the ball moving, keep everybody engaged into the game. And just they're both just guys who really wants to win and is willing to do whatever is necessary. So for me, when you look at where they are today, I believe that we're going to be fine. I believe it's going to give other guys opportunities to play and to show that they can play at this level and that they can assist this team going forward. So I don't look at it as a total devastation. I just look at it just an opportunity for other guys to step in, to build their own careers, to help this Cavalier team become better, and to hold the fort and increase it and protect the fort while those two guys are currently out of commission.
And do you think even suggesting a trade, do you think that messes up the chemistry that we already have?
I don't know anything about trades or suggestions or any of that kind of thing. I just know, that, in this business, you have to do whatever you think is necessary to help your particular team. As it relates to any kind of trades, I'm not aware of anything like that. But it's just a situation, again, you hear this all the time. It's an opportunity for the next man up. I think there is talent that we still have on this team. Yes, Mobley is a big person to kind of replace. Darius is another one of those guys, but hey, there's other guys that's on this team that has some great abilities, and given the opportunities, I'm sure that they can help hold the fort and even get better themselves and help this team become better if given the opportunity. So I just look at it as an opportunity for other guys to take advantage of and to bring their games into it and see how they can help impact this Cavalier basketball team. Because I believe in some of the guys that they have, particularly the young kid, Craig Porter. I just admire his game. And this is an opportunity for him. There's some other opportunities for other guys on this team to step up.
So, Campy, you're not worried, even with the injuries. You still think playoffs are still a destination, I guess you could say.
Well, the opportunity is still there. Again, I still think this team is really a solid basketball team. Yes, losing those two guys is definitely going to hurt. But again, at the same time, there's opportunities for other guys to step up and play. And it's just going to come down to, the overall team's will. And I think we have a bunch of competitors on this basketball team that will lend itself to us continuing to be competitive and still thrive to make the playoff and to impact the playoff once they're in there.
What's the ceiling like for Evan Mobley? Why do you think it's taken him so long to make that next big jump?
I think he's made all the jumps possible. I mean, at this point, at this early age, and at this time of only this is his third year in the league, I believe, or I'm not sure right off, but he's only been around 3 years.
I know, that's crazy.
He's only 21, 22, whatever he is.
Right.
I think it's more about the expectations of fans, and everybody wants to see something, and we're watching something special right now in Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. Those guys are some of the young, talented guys in our league. And, so people are all, because we're all fans, we all want more, and we're always looking for more. And we're looking for it like right now, not a year or two from now. But I think it's a situation that we have a lot of young, talented guys, and you have to let those guys grow and build their own games and to impact the team based upon the things that they do. And I know a lot of times, we as fans, even myself, you want to see more. But when you look at Evan Mobley, this guy, I believe, is going to be a impact guy for a lot of years in our league. And hopefully he will be here in Cleveland impactful.
Yeah, I think that's the thing when you look at like that next big jump. I mean, what does that exactly mean? But a lot of fans are just, they heard and read the comparisons to the body frame, to the style, to some other bigger players in the past. And they're waiting for Evan to be like a Garnett or a Durant or a Bosch or something like that. And fans forget, Campy, it takes time to get there, and it just sometimes those expectations that fans put on their own minds on a particular player, no matter the sport, is just not realistic. It's just not fair.
Well, sometimes those expectations are not just driven by fans. They're just driven by everybody.
Yeah, media, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's podcasts, whether it's just the general talk in conversation, all those expectations are driven by a lot of external things. It doesn't have, and to a large degree, it doesn't have anything to do with internal. But, when you look at a guy like Mobley, the talent is there. It will show up. It's showing up. We're watching it every single night. But the thing about us as fans, we want more right now. And, but at the same time, you have to just enjoy the ride, because all those guys you mentioned early on, whether you're talking about Garnett or whoever those guys that you mentioned, it took them time to get there too.
Sure.
And once they got there, they became, some of the top players in their time. And I just believe that as people who watch the game and fans, sometimes I think we have to be a little bit more patient and allow it to happen, because you have to also understand that those guys want to be great themselves. That's why they work so hard at their game, at their craft, is that they want to be great. And the only way that you can be great is to be on a team that everybody comes together and everybody plays at a certain level, and that they play good team basketball, and they play with a lot of, I'd say, just being disruptive, on both sides of the ball, because you can be disruptive on the offensive side of the ball and you can be disruptive on the defensive side of the ball. So I just think that we need to just kind of sometimes take a step back and just enjoy the progress that your team is making and that the players on those teams are making. They're getting better, and that you're seeing that. And that's what I see when I look at this Cavalier team. We're getting better and better. And it's going to come down to having healthy bodies and continue to be engaged on both sides of the ball.
So you mentioned a little bit about playoffs still being as a realistic goal. I still think it is, obviously. As we sit here on December 19th recording this, how far do you think they go when it's all said and done?
To be honest with you, I have no idea. I'm just because I have no idea. I do believe that this team will have a good season, a great season. I believe that they're going to do all that's necessary to try to put themselves in position to be in the playoffs and to make an impact in the playoffs. That's what I believe wholeheartedly. Now whether they're going to get to that point, I have no idea, but I know the desires are there.
Okay, we always talk about who's on the Mount Olympus of certain team sports, that sort of thing. If you could pick, we'll go 5 players on the Cavs Mount Rushmore. Who would it be? Going back from your playing days all the way up, you can take it all the way up to the present. Who would you put up there in your 5 on Mount Rushmore? It doesn't have to be the best players, but the players that you would see as you're driving into the national park, and there's the Mount Rushmore right in front of you.
In Cleveland's history,
yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. I just believe that it's always going to start and end at this particular point, at least end in my time, with LeBron James, number one. Number 2, I would say probably I have to put Brad Daugherty in that mix as well.
It's tough, isn't it?
Power forward. And I would say probably from a longevity standpoint, from a consistency standpoint, from impactful standpoint, I would say Larry Nance.
Okay.
And I've already mentioned who the small forward would be, which would definitely be LeBron James.
Yeah.
I've already mentioned possibly the center, which would be Brad Daugherty.
For sure.
I would say that from a guard standpoint, wow, that's where it gets
real tough.
funny. Because now, first of all, you have to think back in terms of who were those guards,
Right.
and
Yeah.
but for me, when you go and look at that, I would say, wow, from a shooting guard from perspective, I would say probably went to Miami, Ohio, and Ron Harper.
Wow. Okay.
I know he
Yeah.
was but his impact on the game and on this team was huge.
Got a raw deal too, by the way. When they got rid of him.
Yeah, well, we can always that's the beauty of sports. We can always say what was a great deal and what was a raw deal.
Yes.
I need one more.
But I would say in terms of the in terms of the point guard, if you will, that's always a tough and it's really controversial, and I think but that's again is the beauty of sports, and I would just say probably from that perspective, I would say probably Mark Price. As that guard, you can always say Terrell Brandon,
right?
John Bagley.
Right.
We've had great point guards that have come through here in the past. But again, that's the beauty of sports, is to have those controversies and to say stuff and create opportunities to carry on the dialogue and to keep going. So I'm glad that I had a hand in trying to create that and keep that in terms of the picks that I made, because I'm sure people are probably saying, well, why didn't you pick Jim Jones, or why didn't you pick Nate? And, because we all have had great impact on the history of Cavalier basketball. So when you start to try to narrow it down to 5 people,
it's hard to do.
It's
hard.
It's impossible.
It is.
But the good news is we all have our own great opinions.
Right.
Yes. All right. Last question for you, Campy. You've been around basketball your entire life, played in the NBA. You've been a broadcaster for decades now. It's a big hot topic question. We got to get you this one last answer. Who is the greatest basketball player of all time? Conventional wisdom, it's either LeBron or Jordan. So we'll narrow it down from there. If you had to pick between the two, who would you go with?
Again, this is that same quagmire that everybody gets into,
Right. But just for fun.
Just for, just for fun.
Yeah. Just yeah, exactly.
For fun, for me, we're talking about the greatest basketball player of all time.
Yeah.
Of all time. For me, I would say Magic Johnson.
Oh,
wow.
okay.
All right.
Of all time. Now, I'm talking about that do everything.
Yeah.
In basketball, outside of basketball, in high school, in elementary, and junior high, and not even to this day, in my opinion, if I had to pick somebody, I would take Magic Johnson.
I like how you went the other way, John. That's good.
I respect
love
that. And you know what? That answer I can agree with as well in that conversation for sure.
And there's so many of them. And that's why it's a great question to ask, because it's going to create so much stuff, which is a good thing, because again, you're talking basketball, you're talking how do we create interest, how, that is the best thing that you can bring up if you want to have a lot of conversation, is to ask that question. Now, if you're talking about one of the smaller point guards to ever play, I would say those two people that I would say would be Tiny Archibald and Isaiah Thomas.
Wow. Yes. Oh yeah.
That's what I would say. Again, creating controversy.
Really quick, and you look back, because I'm a baseball fan, and we have baseball video that goes back, 100 years. We can go back to the 1920s, and you go back to the 70s, and that was almost like the beginning of, where the NBA started getting some national exposure. Prior to that, you look at video of the 60s, there really isn't much out there. You wonder if there was more national exposure to the NBA, back in the, in its infancy, the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, and that point, if a lot of those players, from back then would be a lot higher on a lot of people's lists, because you could go on YouTube, you could watch video of them. A lot of these players, you can't see them play. It would be interesting to see how a lot of these names in people's minds would have changed if there was more exposure.
Well, that's always, again, the beauty of sports. If I, could I, should I, would I, if I had the opportunity, what would my opinion be then? And I would think that, again, if you want to try to put numbers on guys, I think the only way you can do it is in their own era. Trying to engage somebody in 2020 into a 1968 game.
Right.
It's you can't do it. You just, because we're talking about a brick and an apple, and they're not even related in any form.
Right.
Right.
That's my opinion about it.
Campy, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for taking the time with us here. I know you're real busy. You're out there at downtown Cleveland. You're busy every day, and it's a pleasure having you on our podcast. Talking about old school Cavs, really old school Cavs back from the 70s, and kind of leading that all the way into our conversation about what's going on here currently. Campy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast, and we hope to talk to you really soon. Hopefully, in the next couple months when the Cavs are deep into the season.
Well, I appreciate you guys extended the invitation for me to be a part of your podcast. I know it has taken some time to make it happen, but hey, timing is everything, all things in its own time. And I've had my time of being part of you all's podcast, and I greatly appreciate it and look forward to doing it sometimes in the future.
Sounds good, Campy. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for listening to this edition of Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It definitely helps us out. Follow the pod on Twitter at Sabol Brothers. Follow yours truly at John_Sabol.
And you can follow me on Twitter, or X, now that it's called, at Scott Sabol FOX8. You can follow me on Instagram at Scott Sabol PICS. Again, we're always looking for feedback, comments, criticisms, suggestions, you name it. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.